Welcome to week 6 of class and to our survey of leadership as discussed in print media, brought to you by Stephanie Hool and Matthew Porowski. We chose to focus our research and analysis on the discussion that has taken place in print media of Donald Trump's leadership. Not a day goes by that he is not featured in various national publications, and his controversial style has led to such extensive discussion in the media that we felt that there would be more than enough information for a broad survey. Our research methodology was to search through the university library as well as the internet for relevant newspaper and magazine articles. We began with general searches such as Donald Trump leadership to get a broad sense of what was out there, and then conducted more specific searches such as Trump ethics or Trump managerial skills to drill into specific areas. One of our first findings was that print media was generally not fond of Trump. Before his election, only 2 major newspapers had endorsed him, which was even less than the newspapers who endorsed anyone but Trump or Libertarian candidate Gary Johnson. We therefore kept an eye out for possible media bias, checking sources against MediaBiasFactCheck.com website, and seeking out counterpoint articles from more conservative media outlets. One more administrative note about the rapidly evolving medium of print in general. We opted to include in our survey some digital sources that may not ever have had hard copy circulation. Many newspapers and magazines have stopped printing on actual paper and shifted to an online-only format, and many sources that do print in hard copy also include online-only content. Other recognized news outlets, such as the Huffington Post or Breitbart.com, were born in the internet and have never been in print, but their online presence is sufficiently similar in format to print media that we considered them fair game. As you're probably aware, the context of the past year included Trump's final months as a presidential candidate and the bulk of his first year in office. It was a shift from a popular Democratic administration to a surprise win by a Republican candidate with no previous experience in public office, a surprise so significant that the legitimacy of the election was disputed in many quarters. The U.S. election came amid significant populist surges around the world, from the Brexit vote in Great Britain to leave the European Union to a similarly charged election in France. Within America, increasingly polarized American constituencies struggled to find common ground. The decline of print media came as social media emerged as a new dominant channel of communication, one that some argued was fueling the social rift between conservatives and progressives. These differences led to vastly divergent expectations for what it meant to be the president and to hold the office that for so many years was synonymous with being the leader of the free world. So with that as background, let's talk about our key findings with regards to candidate/President Trump and his leadership. Much of the discussion of Trump's leadership came as analysis of Trump's leadership as a businessman. He was described as an aggressive negotiator whose management focused on business-minded matters like value for money and bottom-line profit. He's a top-down manager whose high energy and strong projection of confidence is somewhat at odds with his low credibility caused by largely unfiltered communication that is often harsh and even abusive in tone. Mr. Trump is also loyal to a fault, and very much involved in the details of his business operations. This mixed set of leadership traits was acknowledged across the liberal-conservative spectrum, with even the Las Vegas Review-Journal's endorsement of Trump for the presidency, the largest circulation newspaper to lend its support, noting that Mr. Trump's impulsiveness and overheated rhetoric alienate many voters, and that he has trouble dealing with critics and would be wise to discover the power of humility. Much was made of Trump's success as a businessman, as evidenced by his own significant personal wealth. He is recognized as a successful real estate entrepreneur, and his stint on The Apprentice gave him credentials as a media-savvy television personality. These skills as businessman and TV star were assumed by his supporters to have led to his success, assumptions that are based on a belief that Trump is the man he appears to be, that he has a real capability to deliver results, and that he can be trusted to continue delivering results as President of the United States. Trump won over the populations of rural America by projecting a strong concern for their well-being and success, but this compassion and concern does not apply to all people, and Trump is vigorously antagonistic towards those that he sees as opponents. His use of Twitter to critique and personally insult his critics has received widespread condemnation, even as it plays well with the political base that supported him primarily as an agent of disruption. On the other axis of Blake and McCancis' management grid, Trump is someone who is extremely concerned with the appearance of success, although he does not appear to base this in objective targets and achieving them. His style is very focused on personal authority and compliance, and he is quick to fire employees who seem to be either disloyal or ineffective. If part of integrity and ethics is consistency in doing the right thing even when no one is watching, then Trump's ethics are extremely poor. One of the most common descriptions of Trump is unpredictable, while others call him impulsive or outright untruthful. Even more specifically, President Trump has had many accusations of unethical behavior leveled against him. At the end of his campaign, Trump came under massive fire for an extremely lewd exchange with an entertainment personality, in which he spoke graphically of sexually assaulting women and his ability to get away with doing so because of his notoriety. He has also been criticized for the conflicts of interest caused by his extensive business holdings and his use of the presidency as a way of driving business to them. The director of the U.S. Office of Government Ethics, who criticized the way President Trump has handled his business conflicts, resigned in July amid these concerns. So with that as background, let's look at some of the implications of these points for leadership. Although few deny that President Trump has significant ethical shortcomings, the impact of this is perceived differently by different constituencies. Trump's base elected him with awareness of his flaws, and to many his candor and crassness contribute to an air of authenticity that is appealing. A common expression of his base is that Trump's value as a disruptor to a corrupt Washington status quo outweighs his personal failings. Trump's domestic opponents, on the other hand, hate him with a passionate intensity that rivals or exceeds Republican animosity towards President Obama, in large part because, as an individual, Trump is so much less upright than Obama is. On the world stage, meanwhile, the effects of Trump's poor ethical standing are much more consequential. Commentators have highlighted that having a leader with poor ethics directly diminishes the credibility and influence of America as a whole, and some are already signaling that Trump is no longer the leader of the free world. Rather, Germany's Angela Merkel seems to increasingly be filling that role. Nordhaus has highlighted 5 traits that appeared consistently in trait-based studies of effective leadership, and Trump clearly lacks 2 of them and arguably lacks a third. As we've seen in our discussion of ethics, Trump's integrity is lacking. And as we discussed in the leadership grid, Trump's abrasive and abusive tendencies mean that his sociability is poor. With regard to intelligence, Trump is honestly hard to assess. Politico noted that Trump talks like a third grader, based on an analysis of his language, but warned against interpreting Trump's low scores as a marker of low intelligence. Trump's professional history and overall successes indicate many attributes that would qualify as intelligence. The effectiveness of Trump's idiosyncratic rhetorical style suggests that perhaps too many politicians talk over the public's head, when more should be talking beneath it in the hope of winning elections. Trump does exhibit strong determination, and he projects high self-confidence, but his self-confidence does sometimes seem disconnected from his actual performance. Biographers, ex-employees, veteran New York City gossip columnists, public relations professionals, and political operatives from both major parties say that Trump has a well-established pattern of stumbling in his professional dealings, loudly proclaiming victory in spite of evidence, and then moving on to other things, and that this pattern of behavior is imperative to understanding Trump. This pattern has at least gotten him to the White House, though, and it remains to be seen whether he can carry it through. One of the biggest implications for leadership, especially for Trump, has to do with the transferability of leadership skills. Katz's 3-skill approach discusses the relative importance of technical, human, and conceptual skills, with human and conceptual skills most important in high-level leadership positions. Trump's leadership skills, and the keys to his success as a businessman, were developed in what was essentially a family business, with a high degree of central management control and a limited constituency. As Davenport puts it, leaders in a business have a single overriding goal which must be proven to a well-defined audience of investors, making a profit measured every quarter. In other words, the conceptual requirements are well-defined and not particularly complex. By contrast, political leaders have multiple goals, few of which are clearly stated or predominant over the others. They have multiple constituencies and a plethora of responsibilities measured primarily by the vagaries of political polls and elections. They have a lot of responsibility, but, unlike a corporate CEO, relatively little authority to get things done. Theirs is the realm of persuasion, not power. They can only get done what they convince Congress and others to join in. Technical skills that Trump has leveraged in the real estate world, such as having subsidiary companies declare bankruptcy, may have much more far-reaching implications and complications at the national level. Similarly, the human skills that Trump used as a businessman to make real estate deals may not transfer well to the niceties of partisan politics or international diplomacy. If President Trump relies too heavily on an irrelevant skill set, his ability to lead will be compromised. Many would argue that this is exactly what we are seeing. So, what did we take away from all this? Perceptions of effective leadership can be highly subjective and contingent on the criteria or approach that are used to define leadership and effectiveness. As we saw in the second week of class, there is no single agreed-upon definition of leadership. Although there was broad consensus across media about Trump's traits and behavior, the meaning assigned to these ranged from seeing Trump as a determined agent of change to an inept narcissist. Differing understandings of leaders' goals also can lead to varying interpretation of leaders' effectiveness. Several times in the course of this project, the authors found that while looking at the same source and considering the same approach, we evaluated and came to different conclusions. We were both agreed, however, that in light of the lessons from this course so far, Trump is a poor leader of America as a whole because of his exclusive focus on his base, his tendency to attack and demean anyone who disagrees with him, and his generally unpredictable and unprincipled behavior. Another takeaway is that using print media as a singular source of information and analysis of leadership is also highly subjective. The lack of interaction between author and opposing viewpoints make it extremely challenging to give significance to any one article. It's also necessary to play devil's advocate and review sources for a wide range of media biases. Nearly all newspapers in America have a generally unfavorable opinion of Trump, as is evidenced by the balance of their endorsements in the 2016 election. Individual print articles reported the interpretation that best aligned with individual perspectives, and American people sourced their news from the outlets that backed up their belief. This cyclical pattern of media consumption led to the surprise of Trump's election, but it also exemplifies the challenge of analysis via any media. Tools such as the website Media Bias Fact Check, www.mediabiasfactcheck.com, are useful for contextualizing the perspectives of individual sources and seeking alternative perspectives. Thank you so much for your time and attention. We'd like to leave you with 2 questions for discussion. First, in our classes, we frequently discuss leadership approaches as they pertain to our professional organizations, but considering the United States as a whole to be an organization is a vastly different concept. What leadership approach do you feel is most relevant when discussing political leadership? Secondly, newspaper and magazine circulation is on the decline, and online-only content has increased even for sources that do still print in hard copy. How do you think this shift towards online print media will impact the way that leadership is portrayed by these sources? Does the shortened time that it takes for articles to reach the public impact the messages that are shared? And of course, we would never have gotten here without the help of our references. And more references. Our many, many references. We thought about putting everything on one slide, but it was just too hard to read. Thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you on Blackboard.